Chapter 9:15. When Shen Yan returned home, for the first time, he ignored Gu Shengyin on the sofa and went straight to his room. Soon, there was a knock on his door. Shen Yan knew who it was, but he didn't say anything. Xiao Yan. It was a familiar voice. But Shen Yan didn't want to see her now. He was afraid that he would do something irreversible on impulse. "Sister, I'm not feeling well today. I don't want to eat dinner. I want to sleep early," he said sullenly. There was silence outside the door, and then there was the sound of footsteps leaving. Shen Yan exhaled. The next day was a rest day. Shen Yan didn't get out of bed in the morning. He let himself lie quietly in bed for a long time. It wasn't until noon that he made a decision. "Sister." After breakfast, the two of them sat on the sofa. Gu Shengyin glanced at him. "Are you feeling better now?" Shen Yan nodded. "Sister, after the college entrance examination, can I ask you for a gift?" When he said this, he deliberately glanced at Gu Shengyin's hand. Fortunately, he didn't see a ring. Gu Shengyin smiled. "Sure, just tell me what you want." Shen Yan smiled. "I'll tell you when the time comes." Then he said casually, "Oh right, I saw someone on the street yesterday. It's Qin Chuan." "Sister, do you remember him?" "Qin Chuan?" Gu Shengyin didn't expect Shen Yan to still remember him after so long. She nodded. "Qin Chuan and I are friends. We even went out for a meal yesterday." Not only did they have a meal, but they also looked at the ring together. Shen Yan kept these words in his heart and didn't say it out loud. "I remember that Qin Chuan seems to like you. Sister, are you two now?" Shen Yan tried his best to show a teasing expression. No one knew how high his heart was. Gu Shengyin had a strange expression. She glared at Shen Yan. "What are you thinking about?" This child was about to take the college entrance examination, but he was still thinking about such things. However, Shen Yan misunderstood her words to mean something else. He thought that her unfinished words were because she was shy. Shen Yan lowered his eyes to hide the coldness in them. He suddenly hugged Gu Shengyin's arm. "Sister, you must remember the gift you promised me." Gu Shengyin looked at Shen Yan inexplicably. "When have I ever gone back on my words in front of you? Don't worry, I don't care what you want. As long as I can give it to you, I will definitely give it to you, okay?" She had read the books. For the students who were about to take the college entrance examination, she had to try her best to satisfy their requirements. Therefore, Gu Shengyin easily sold herself out. Shen Yan smiled mysteriously. "Okay, I'll remember it." Now that the words had been spoken, there was no chance for him to go back on his words. Half a month later, Shen Yan walked out of the examination hall and saw a familiar car. He walked over in a few steps and, as expected, saw someone in the car. Shen Yan frowned. "It's so hot outside. Why did you come out? If I get a heat stroke, I'll feel terrible for a long time." Gu Shengyin handed him a bottle of water. "I'm sitting in the car. Don't worry. Come up, let's eat first." After dinner, Shen Yan returned to school. In the next 2 days, there were gatherings, celebrations, and a thank-you banquet. 3 years of tears and youth came to an end here. Many people cried and laughed. Shen Yan wasn't one of them. To him, there was something more important waiting for him. It was time to fulfill the promise that someone had made. Chapter 9:16. Gu Shengyin was in a daze. She felt like she had fallen into a grotesque dream. There was a sweet aroma in the air, making her sleepy head even more groggy. Then there was the familiar lotus fragrance in her soul. Lotus fragrance. Wait. Gu Shengyin's mind cleared. She opened her eyes with difficulty. It was very dark around her. It should be dark. Xiao Yan. The familiar smell told her that there was someone beside her. Shen Yan seemed a little surprised. "Sister, you're awake?" Gu Shengyin wanted to get up and turn on the lights, but she found that her hands couldn't move. She was tied to the head of the bed. Gu Shengyin was speechless. She said calmly, "Xiao Yan, can you explain what's going on?" Shen Yan smiled softly. "I remember that you promised me that you would give me a gift after the college entrance examination." Perhaps because his tone was a little subtle, Gu Shengyin immediately thought of something unspeakable. She asked the system uncertainly, "I don't think there's anything wrong with me raising a child." System. At this time, as a qualified system, it felt that it needed to remain silent. Gu Shengyin, who hadn't received an answer from the system, was speechless. She felt that her body was a little hot. This kind of heat was a little different from usual. It was fine and dense, as if it was spreading from the most secret part of her body. Little by little, it burned her rationality until it was chaotic, and there was no way to avoid it. She didn't think of anything else until she heard her own panting. Gu Shengyin felt a little empty in her heart. She couldn't believe it. Xiao Nian, he actually drugged me? Shen Yan had been sitting in the darkness for a long time, so he could clearly see Gu Shengyin's expression. He only took a glance before standing up and covering Gu Shengyin's eyes. Shen Yan knew that after he did something, many things might be irreparable. But he still didn't dare to look into Gu Shengyin's eyes. He was afraid that the other party's clear and gentle eyes would reveal a look of disgust and disappointment when she looked at him. "Sister," he said softly, "this is just a little toy to liven things up. I carefully selected it for a long time. It definitely won't have any adverse effects on your body." A familiar aura surrounded his body. Gu Shengyin opened her mouth again. She felt that she needed to talk to Shen Yan. But Shen Yan didn't give her the chance. He immediately covered Gu Shengyin's mouth. After a long and lingering kiss, what made Gu Shengyin the most helpless was that under the effect of the drug, her body actually took the initiative to respond to Shen Yan. She didn't reject such intimacy, but she felt that she should make things clear with Shen Yan. If Shen Yan did this, it was very easy for something to happen. If it were anyone else, they would be angry or even feel humiliated by such inexplicable treatment. However, Shen Yan seemed to know what she was thinking and didn't give her a chance to speak at all. "Sister, I know that you must hate me to the core now. Don't speak. At least, don't speak now. Let me deceive myself, okay?" Gu Shengyin's mouth was blocked by something. She couldn't speak, but she didn't feel uncomfortable. She felt Shen Yan's face buried in her neck, and something warm slid down her skin. It was tears. Chapter 9:17. Gu Shengyin was so angry that she was amused. "What do you mean by this?" she asked coldly. Shen Yan looked up at her. "I know what I did is unforgivable. Sister, you can punish me however you want." Gu Shengyin sneered. "If I punish you, will what you did offset it?" Shen Yan stared at her without blinking. "If I could go back in time, I would still do the same." There was no hesitation in his words. "I can't stand sister being with another man. If that's the case, I can't guarantee that I won't do something irreparable." Gu Shengyin really wanted to imitate those unreasonable girls on TV and casually throw the things in his hands at this abominable guy. However, neither her personality nor her upbringing allowed her to do such a thing. Gu Shengyin felt that Shen Yan's actions were simply stupid. If it were anyone else, even if they had him in their heart would probably turn cold after encountering such a thing. She wanted to properly teach him how to conduct himself in the right way. Hence, she laughed, but there was no warmth in her laughter. "Shen Yan." Shen Yan heard her sister call him by his full name. She rarely acted like this, which meant that she was really angry this time. However, this wasn't what made Shen Yan panic the most. Instead, it was Gu Shengyin's tone that was too calm. Shen Yan would rather her sister scold her or slap her twice like just now. It would be better than talking to her in such calm words. It was as if he was just an insignificant person to her. Gu Shengyin's tone was very calm, and even her thoughts were very clear. "Qin Chuan and I are just ordinary friends. He has a girlfriend, Su Miao Miao. You've met her before." Shen Yan suddenly raised his head. Gu Shengyin ignored him and continued. "He asked me to look at the ring because he plans to propose to Su Miao Miao on her birthday. He wants me to give him a reference." Shen Yan's heart seemed to be experiencing endless suffering. Her sister had nothing to do with Qin Chuan. She didn't like anyone else, and she wouldn't be with him. But because of that groundless jealousy, he did a stupid thing. This was nothing. What he said next shocked Shen Yan the most. Gu Shengyin looked at him quietly. "Do you really like me? If you really like me, then have you ever truly felt my heart? Have you noticed that it is also beating for you?" Shen Yan. What? Shen Yan felt that he must be hallucinating. Her words just now meant that his elder sister liked him too, right? Gu Shengyin seemed to have let go of something. She blurted out everything in her heart. Xin Yan listened to those words that could be considered a confession, but he didn't feel happy at all. If he had known all of this a day ago, he would probably have gone crazy with joy. But it just had to be after he had done such an unforgivable thing out of jealousy. At this time, what was his elder sister trying to do by telling him all this? Xin Yan had a bad feeling about this. His premonition was not wrong. Gu Shengyin smiled coldly. Xin Yan, you're very good. You're already an adult. I don't want to see you again. Chapter 9:18. Now, get the hell out of here. Gu Shengyin turned around after saying that. She didn't want to see her at all. Unexpectedly, the next moment, her body sank. Her entire body was hugged by someone. Shen Yan, who had been kneeling by the bed just now, had already climbed onto the bed. Gu Shengyin struggled but couldn't break free. Let go, she said angrily. Shen Yan said innocently, I won't let go. Gu Shengyin was speechless. Shen Yan, don't make me hate you. Shen Yan thought that whoever let go at this time would be a fool. Ever since he heard Gu Shengyin admit that she liked him, Shen Yan had been kneeling there thinking of a solution. He had already guessed all the possible reactions Gu Shengyin might have. After thinking about it, the best solution was to be shameless. No matter how his sister reacted, he just needed to pester her to the end. He wouldn't fight back or scold her, but it was impossible for him to leave. His sister was really angry now. There was already such a conflict between the two of them. If he really listened to her and left, he was afraid that there would really be a gap between the two of them. He might as well pester her and say, I did make a mistake, but I admit it. He had a lifetime to admit and correct his mistake. Shen Yan hugged Gu Shengyin tightly and said, I know I'm a jerk and did something wrong. Sister, don't chase me away. I'm willing to be your slave. Let me atone for my sins, okay? Gu Shengyin didn't expect that she had really misjudged him this time. In her eyes, Shen Yan had always been a quiet and elegant boy. However, in just a day and night, she saw two completely different sides of him. She had never seen such a black-bellied bigotry at night, and this hooligan during the day was even more eye-opening. In the end, Shen Yan successfully stayed at home. Gu Shengyin had only said that on purpose. She just didn't expect Shen Yan's reaction to be like this. After Mrs. Chang came back, she noticed that something was wrong between the two of them. Gu Shengyin used to care so much about Shen Yan. She would call him every time she saw him. But now, the two of them ate at the same table, but she didn't even look at him. On the other hand, Shen Yan was still the same as before. He relied on his sister and would even put food in her bowl. However, Gu Shengyin would always frown and ignore him. Mrs. Chang couldn't stand it anymore. She asked Gu Shengyin in private, but how could Gu Shengyin tell her the real reason? He was just finding an excuse to brush her off. On the other hand, Shen Yan specially went to tell Mrs. Chang that she had done something wrong. Her sister was still angry. As for what he had done wrong, he naturally couldn't say it out loud. For the entire summer vacation, for a few months, Shen Yan stayed by Gu Shengyin's side. Even if she rolled her eyes and gave him the cold shoulder every day, he didn't care at all. Compared to the torment after seeing her and Qin Chuan choose a ring, being close to his sweetheart every day was simply heaven. Gu Shengyin originally wanted to give him the cold shoulder and watch him suffer for a period of time, so that he could suffer a little. She didn't expect this kid to be unaffected at all. Every day, he only cared about looking at her affectionately. When the two of them were together, he couldn't wait to confess to her every day. He looked like he was infinitely satisfied as long as he was by her side. Not only did she not see him sad, but he also looked refreshed and energetic every day. Gu Shengyin was worn out. Counting the days, she felt that it was about time. If this continued, it would be meaningless for the two of them to waste time. Chapter 9:19. That morning, the two of them sat on the sofa and watched TV as usual. The living room was very quiet. Only the voices of the actors on the TV could be heard clearly. Around 10 o'clock, Shen Yan got up. After that, he came out with a plate of washed and cut fruits. Shen Yan's treatment these days told him that she wouldn't respond if he handed it over. Although Gu Shengyin no longer asked him to leave, she also ignored him. It was more like she ignored his existence. Shen Yan was already prepared. He knew that she was angry. It didn't matter. He had an entire life to wait for her to forgive him. Shen Yan habitually handed the fruit plate in his hand to Gu Shengyin on the coffee table. Then, he saw Gu Shengyin pick one up and put it into his mouth with a calm expression. Shen Yan? He was stunned for a moment. Then, Gu Shengyin turned around and complained to him, I don't like this. I want to eat mangosteen tomorrow. Shen Yan stared blankly at this familiar sister of his. In a trance, he felt as if a lifetime had passed. Gu Shengyin raised her eyebrows. Did you hear me? Shen Yan came back to his senses and stood up, scaring Gu Shengyin. He quickly said, Sister, you want to eat mangosteen? There's no need to wait until tomorrow. I'll buy it now. With that, he immediately left. Gu Shengyin's eyes were still fixed on the TV, but a smile appeared on her face. Silly. Shen Yan left the room. He leaned against the door and looked up at the sky. His eyes were red. When he heard his sister's words just now, he resisted the urge to cry. Everything was better than he had imagined. Shen Yan felt that since that summer 4 years ago, his life had been rewritten by a girl named Ling Su. He used to think that he had a lifetime to get her forgiveness. But now, he had a lifetime to love her and dote on her. Thus, on this morning, half a month before the new semester started, Gu Shengyin ate mangosteen, which she didn't particularly like, and gained a loyal dog boyfriend who was 187 meters tall. When Mrs. Chang came back with some daily necessities, she found that the two masters who had been in a cold war had reconciled. He really couldn't understand the world of young people. She was old. One day, Gu Shengyin specially invited Qin Chuan and Su Miaomiao out for a meal. Shen Yan didn't know her intentions at first. It wasn't until he saw the two of them flaunting their affection that he realized what she wanted him to see. Back at home, he hugged Gu Shengyin's waist tightly and rested his chin on her shoulder. Sister, I'm sorry. Gu Shengyin patted his arm in disgust. You used so much strength. My waist hurts. As soon as she finished speaking, she felt the strength around her waist loosen a lot, but the two of them were still tightly pressed against each other. To be honest, after such a long time, she no longer cared about that matter. Today, she just wanted him to be at ease and not think too much about it. The reason was that she realized that Shen Yan would become especially paranoid when it came to everything related to her. She didn't want to leave a knot in their hearts because of this. You're the most important person to me, Shen Yan. You're also the person who will be with me forever and spend the rest of our lives together. She said this solemnly. Shen Yan didn't say anything. He just hugged her for a long time. It was so long that Gu Shengyin thought he had fallen asleep. Only then did she hear his voice softly ring in her ear. Me too. Chapter 920. Without any surprise, he watched the little kingfisher's body disappear from his palm. Gu Shengyin calmly said to the system, Begin the next world. The daughter of the Great Lai dynasty's right minister, Su Chaohua. When she was born, there was a vision from the heavens. The world saw the image of a phoenix descend on the right minister's residence and circle the residence 3 times. The emperor of the Great Lai dynasty thought this was the will of the heavens. He immediately sent down an imperial edict and set Su Chaohua as the official consort for the young crown prince Yunqi. Su Chaohua lived up to her name as the reincarnation of a phoenix. She was young and smart, and was familiar with poetry. When she grew up, she had a beauty that could topple cities. Su Chaohua was taught from a young age by the future mother of the nation. Her words and actions were a role model for women in the world. When she was 16, she married into the Eastern Palace and was deeply in love with the crown prince. When she was 26, she entered the Middle Palace. 10 years she was pampered, but had no children. She used to think that she was the happiest woman in the world. She had the most honorable status and a husband who was respected and loved by the emperor. Until the imperial edict came to her palace. Empress Su has had no children for many years. She could not be the empress and was demoted to a concubine and moved to the serene Cloud Palace. End of the Imperial Edict. The serene Cloud Palace had always been a place where no favored concubines lived. It did not have the name of a cold palace, but it was a cold palace in reality. Su Chaohua had never thought that the man would treat him so heartlessly. She rushed into Yunqi's palace and saw a scene that made her face pale. The most honorable man in the world was carefully holding a bowl of soup and gently coaxing a woman, as if he wanted her to drink more. When the woman saw her come over, she did not know what she was thinking. She raised her hand and knocked the bowl in the emperor's hand to the ground. "How dare you?" Su Chaohua said this sentence out of habit. However, the woman did not pay attention to her. The emperor did not seem to care that his robe was dirty. His gaze swept over and he looked at her as if he was looking at a stranger. "Scram!" she heard him say to her. 16 years of childhood sweethearts, 10 years of love as husband and wife. Now, there was only an emotionless scram. Su Chaohua straightened her back. Yes. Even if she was in a sorry state after losing, Su Chaohua's pride did not allow her to show it. That afternoon, she moved out of the central palace that symbolized the empress and was rushed to Serene Cloud Palace in a few steps. And the next day, guests came to Serene Cloud Palace. Su Chaohua looked at the imperial concubine who had thrown a tantrum at the emperor the day before. She knew who she was. She was the daughter of the prime minister, Lu Shi. The two of them had entered the palace at about the same time, but one was the noble crown princess, and the other was an unfavored side consort. In these 10 years, Yunqi had never shown any affection for Lu Shi. Everyone knew that His Highness the Crown Prince loved the Crown Princess, who was born with the fate of the Phoenix Emperor, the most. But now, what else did Su Chaohua not understand? Lu Shi looked at Su Chaohua as if she had seen something extremely disgusting. "Do you know, Su Chaohua, the person I hate the most in my life is you. Brother Yunqi and I are clearly childhood sweethearts who love each other, but you have the destiny of an empress. For 10 whole years, I watched you stand by his side for 10 whole years, while I could only be a lowly concubine, watching you and him enjoy the blessings of the world together from the corner. Every day, I think, Su Chaohua, why haven't you died yet?" Lu Shi looked at her coldly, her tone cold. This story was thanks to Ninth Demon's Darling for providing part of the imagination. Chapter 921. But I'm glad that you're not dead. Lu Shi suddenly changed her tone. "Did you know? When the Imperial Edict was issued yesterday, my palace of Gongquan also received it." Lu Shi's expression was secretive and proud. The first imperial noble consort of the Great Lai dynasty. Brother Yunqi said that when my child is born, he will make me the empress. He won't let my child become a lowly concubine's son. Lu Shi caressed her lower abdomen, cherished it. For 10 years she had not been pregnant because of this. Now, she finally had a child that belonged to her and Brother Yunqi. When she heard the word child, Su Chaohua's expression finally changed. Everyone knew that she had not had a child for 10 years, but no one knew that she had once been pregnant. But that child was too unlucky and did not come to this world peacefully. Lu Shi's expression suddenly became strange. "Su Chaohua, you haven't had a child. Have you always been sad and guilty? Do you feel that you have let Brother Yunqi down? You don't have to feel guilty at all because Brother Yunqi doesn't want your child at all. Do you know that for your first child, it was Brother Yunqi who personally ordered that a strange poison from the western regions be added to the medicine that he gave you to prevent miscarriage?" Su Chaohua's calm expression suddenly cracked. She looked at Lu Shi in shock. This was the effect that Lu Shi wanted. "Brother Yunqi doesn't like you. How could he let you, the empress, give birth to a legitimate son? Su Chaohua, you have to remember that your glory these 10 years was just a smokescreen that Brother Yunqi used to protect me. From the beginning to the end, you were just a laughable failure. Oh right, I forgot to tell you one last thing." Lu Shi lowered her head and whispered in Su Chaohua's ear, who seemed to have lost all expression and anger. "I asked Brother Yunqi to do all of this. I hate you, Su Chaohua. So I want to see you live a life worse than death." She looked at Su Chaohua happily as if she was a puppet that had lost all life. Her heart was incomparably carefree. but she did not see the cold light that flashed in Su Chaohua's eyes. In the next moment, a huge force fiercely hit her. She cried out and fell to the ground uncontrollably. An intense pain was transmitted from her lower body. Lu Shi was horrified to find that her light green skirt was stained with blood. Her visit to Su Chaohua this time was too secretive, so all the palace servants were standing guard outside. Who would have thought that he would dig a hole for himself? The last thing Lu Shi saw was the crazed Su Chaohua. She fainted at that moment. Therefore, she did not know that Su Chaohua had poured all the oil on the ground and ignited the entire serene cloud palace. By the time the palace servants outside realized that something was wrong, the fire in the main hall was already out of control. The deposed Madame Su had died in that accidental fire. At the same time, Lady Lu, who had just been promoted to imperial noble consort, was also surprised. Madame Lu was rescued, but her face and body were all burned. The fetus in her belly was miscarried, and her body was seriously damaged. It was impossible for her to conceive again in the future. Not to mention this, even if she could still get pregnant, with Madame Lu's current appearance, it was still uncertain whether she could be favored. Su Chaohua deliberately didn't take her life because he wanted to return it to her. Lu Shi wanted her to live a life worse than death. She returned her a life worse than death. Chapter 9:22. Gu Shengyin regained her senses and found that the top of her head was heavy. Her body was swaying as if she was sitting in a sedan. When she opened her eyes, she saw a sea of red in front of her. She reached out and lifted a corner of the red veil. Indeed, she was 16 years old and had just married Crown Prince Yunqi. At this time, Su Chaohua was still a person who held boundless expectations for the future and was both sweet and worried about his marriage. Everything had not started yet. No, it should be said that everything had just started. At this time, Lu Shi was still the left Prime Minister's residence's young miss. When the Crown Prince got married, he naturally could not take in a secondary consort at the same time. Doing so would not give the Yu family any face. Yunqi still needed the support of the right Prime Minister's faction, so of course he would not do such a stupid thing. Gu Shengyin put down her hand and sat there quietly. She actually admired Su Chaohua. He dared to love and hate. In the end, he did not let Lu Shi get a good ending. How well could a disfigured and childless consort live in a harem filled with beauties? How much sincerity could a person like Yunqi, who could act for 10 years and pass off the fake as the real thing? On the bustling street, there was a tea house whose second-floor window was slightly opened. A beautiful woman wearing a light yellow dress expressionlessly looked at the 10 miles of red makeup that made everyone click their tongues in wonder. Lu Shi's heart was bleeding with hatred. All of this should have been hers. It was all Su Chaohua's fault. That damned phoenix fate. As expected, the two of them were born to be at odds. Even their names were like this. Lu Shi, Su Chaohua. They were born to be enemies. However, when she thought of what Brother Yunqi said to her a few days ago, she felt relieved. So what if I'm the Crown Prince's consort? Brother Yunqi's heart only belongs to me. Soon, I will become the Crown Prince's secondary consort and rightfully accompany him by his side. In the Crown Prince's palace, Yunqi's face was solemn, as if he did not have the slightest bit of joy from the wedding. The eunuchs serving beside him felt strange. The Crown Prince and the Crown Princess had known each other since childhood and their relationship had always been good. Logically speaking, the Crown Prince should be very happy now. However, the Crown Prince might be too nervous. The eunuch's heart. Yunqi's trying hard to keep a straight face and not let himself show any expression that he should not. But no one would be able to calm down after waking up and finding themselves in a different place, a different body, or even a different world. Yunqi's original name was also Yunqi, but he was clearly from a grassroots background. He had relied on himself for more than 30 years and finally became a tall, rich, and handsome winner in life. His company had just been listed, and he had drunk too much at the company's celebration party last night, so he had fallen into a deep sleep. However, when he woke up, he found himself lying on a luxurious gold bed that was several times bigger than his own huge king-sized bed. Around him, there was a delicate and pretty boy who looked like he was still underage. The boy was calling him, Your Highness Crown Prince. Yunqi. I wonder if I can go back after sleeping for a while more? However, reality told him that he couldn't go back after sleeping. Before Yunqi could get used to his new identity, he was informed that he was about to get married. This body was still alright, it was already 20 years old. However, his crown princess was said to be only 16 years old. Yunqi was speechless. If you do something like this, you will be sentenced in our society. The expressionless great President Yun had a straight face as his eunuchs helped him change into his wedding clothes. Then, he expressionlessly waited for the arrival of his little bride. The biggest fantasy in this world was, the crown prince had transmigrated. This story was also called, Great President Yun's Transmigration. Chapter 923. According to the rules of the Great Lai dynasty, the crown prince was the heir to the throne, so he did not need to personally go to the bride's home like other bridegrooms. Yunqi had enough time to wait in the Fu in a daze, to accept the truth. As a man who had received positive education in a socialist and harmonious society, Yunqi admitted that although he wasn't a very kind person, he definitely hadn't done anything that offended the heavens and reason. Then why did he have to encounter this kind of transmigration? He could not understand. But at this time, it was not important whether he understood or not, because it had already become the truth. Fortunately, this body seemed to show respect to the crown prince consort and didn't set up a bed warmer before the wedding. Even the palace maids sent by the palace to teach others were sent away by the original crown prince with a reason. Yunqi breathed a sigh of relief. Although he had begun to convince himself to accept the identity of Crown Prince Yunqi, it did not mean that he could accept a large number of women with whom he had no feelings. This was fine. He did not know what kind of person the original crown prince was. Would he be exposed? Just as he was thinking this, he suddenly felt dizzy. The sudden dizziness caused him to stagger and almost fall to the ground. Your Highness! The personal head eunuch Ing Fu was scared out of his wits. He hurriedly supported him and was about to call the imperial physician. Yunqi hurriedly stopped him. I am fine, I just stood there for a long time and felt a little dizzy. Ing Fu was still a little worried, but Yunqi glanced at him indifferently and Ing Fu immediately shut his mouth. Yunqi was accepting the memories that originally belonged to Crown Prince Yunqi in his mind. He did not know which of his words had turned on the switch, but suddenly the memories flooded him like a tide. Yunqi picked up the teacup on the table and lightly took a sip to ease the complicated feelings in his heart. Just from these memories, this Yunqi was really a bit of a scum. Originally, from the reactions of the people around him, Yunqi was very fond of and looked forward to his wife. After all, the two had been engaged since young and could be called childhood sweethearts. But now he knew that Yunqi did have a childhood sweetheart with deep feelings, but it was not his future wife. Instead, it was the daughter of the left prime minister, Liu Shi, who was also a young lady with a good reputation in the capital. The two of them had almost reached the stage of privately pledging their lives to each other. They had even agreed to wait until 3 months after the crown prince's wedding to take Liu Shi as his concubine. If Yunqi really liked Liu Shi, he should not let her be his concubine. But the crown prince needed the right minister's faction to back him up, and he also needed Su Chaohua's prophecy. She was born with the fate of the phoenix, so Yunqi did not dare to let her marry anyone else. Therefore, he had wronged his true love Liu Shi. But to Yunqi, the one who felt the most wronged was Su Chaohua, who was about to become the crown princess. Her husband liked another woman, and all the love and doting he had shown her in the past was all an act. She was just a 16-year-old girl, and she had no idea that the wedding she had been looking forward to was just a perfect lie. Inexplicably, Yunqi felt a faint sense of pity for his future wife. Your Highness the Crown Prince, Her Highness the Crown Prince Consort's wedding sedan has already arrived at the palace. An eunuch hurriedly came over to report. Chapter 924. Yunqi glanced at Ing Fu. Ing Fu chuckled as he took out 2 silver ingots with a red thread tied to it from his sleeve and threw them to the young eunuch. His Highness bestowed this to you, to give you some luck. The little eunuch happily took it and retreated. Yun-chi, followed by a group of people, walked to the entrance of the palace. Gu Shengyin only felt the sedan shake slightly before it stabilized. She knew that she had arrived at the palace. Next, the groom led the bride out. Yun-chi reached out his hand, and someone beside him handed over a longbow that was already prepared. To be honest, Yun-chi was not good at archery, but fortunately, the original crown prince was not weak in this aspect, and this body's instincts were still there. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. 3 arrows were shot at the sedan door, and a burst of applause came from beside him. The surroundings were filled with festive red, and countless people gathered around to look at him. In such an environment, Yun-chi actually felt a rare sense of nervousness. After all, he was someone who would not even blink when giving a speech in front of thousands of people. The curtain of the sedan was lifted by the bridesmaid, revealing a figure with a red veil on her head. Yun-chi exhaled, revealing a faint smile as he extended his hand to her. Gu Shengyin's heart was like this. Oh, system, why is he the crown prince? System, analyzing data, Gu Shengyin. Usually, the system would not be able to detect anything at this time, and Gu Shengyin was already used to this. She elegantly reached out her hand that had been hidden in her sleeve, and gently placed it on Yun-chi's hand. What a beautiful hand! Yun-chi could not help but sigh in his heart. Under the warm red light, this white hand was flawless, and the shape was perfect. It was even more beautiful than some of the hand models he had seen on TV. The slightly cold touch told Yun-chi that she was not as calm as she looked. If she was in the modern world, she would still be a high school student, but here she was about to get married. Yun-chi unconsciously pitied this little wife of his. He gently held Gu Shengyin's hand, and the two of them walked into the main hall together. What followed was a long and complicated ceremony. The crown prince's wedding was only slightly less complicated than the emperor's. She was busy from morning until dusk. Gu Shengyin finally had time to take a breather. Yun-chi was still receiving the blessings of his ministers and brothers outside. Fortunately, he was the crown prince and not many people dared to force him to drink. Otherwise, with so many guests, if each of them came, even 10 Yun-chi would not be enough. Gu Shengyin ate 2 glutinous rice balls with the help of her personal maidservant. Then she shook her head, indicating that she did not need any more. When Yun-chi walked to the door, he felt a little hot. He loosened his collar and paused for a moment before entering the room. He looked at the bride sitting quietly on the wedding bed and took a deep breath without batting an eyelid. Finally, he took the wedding certificate from the matron of honor and removed the veil on Gu Shengyin's head. The room was filled with light. Whether it was Yun-chi or the other women who stayed in the room to serve, all of them let out a gasp. This bride's appearance was really too dazzling. Before seeing his little bride, Yun-chi had never thought that he was a good-looking person. With his status in the modern world, he had seen countless beauties. There were also many beauties who were willing to throw themselves at him because of his status. Yun-chi had never had any different thoughts because of anyone's appearance. Until he saw her. Chapter 925. Even though he had seen Su Chaohua's appearance in Crown Prince Yun-chi's memories, when Yun-chi saw her in person, he still felt a kind of shock that directly struck his heart. Perhaps it was because Crown Prince Yun-chi did not have a good impression of Su Chaohua, causing the Su Chaohua in his memories to lose some of her color. Only after seeing her in person could he feel her soul-stirring beauty. Yun-chi held her hand and drank the wine from the wedding cup. After that, the outsiders in the wedding room all dispersed, leaving only the 2 newlyweds. Yun-chi once again looked at his little wife under the burning red candles. Looking at a beauty under the candlelight, the more beautiful it was, the more intoxicating it was. He once again sighed with emotion. How did the original Crown Prince Yun-chi manage to be so cold-hearted in front of such a great beauty? If it was him, facing such a delicate and timid little wife, he would definitely take care of her in the palm of his hand and not let her suffer the slightest bit of harm. Wait a minute. Yun-chi was shocked by his own thoughts. It was clearly the first time the two of them met. Why would he suddenly have such thoughts? He looked at Gu Shengyin again. That's right, it was like that. When he saw her, he wanted to take her under his wings and properly cherish her. Was he really a superficial person who looked at people's faces? Great Chairman Yun fell into deep thought. The two of them fell into a kind of mysterious and awkward atmosphere. In the end, it was Gu Xingyin who felt that if this continued, the two of them would sit facing each other until dawn. She lightly coughed and called out, "Your Highness the Crown Prince." Her voice was gentle and soft, causing Yun Qi to tremble from head to toe. He subconsciously said, "Just call me Yun Qi." After saying that, he realized that he was no longer the Yun Qi of the past. As the Crown Prince of a country, saying such words, wasn't it a bit too ambiguous? Sure enough, when he turned his head, he saw his little wife slightly lower her head with a bashful expression. A beauty's rosy cheeks, for any man, was a silent temptation. After realizing what kind of reaction his body had, Yun Qi inwardly scolded himself as a beast. How could he be in heat towards such a small girl? Then she heard her young wife say in a low voice, "Then Your Highness." "Yun Qi, just call me Ru. That's my nickname." Yun Qi's ears went numb from her extremely shy tone. Then, Gu Xingyin saw that the people around her had no reaction. She was very sensitive to human auras. At this time, she could feel the nervousness of the people around her. A more vivid description would be, at this moment, all the muscles in Yun Qi's body were in a tense state, and his heartbeat was unusually fast. This is not normal. Gu Xingyin, who knew the plot, understood that Crown Prince Yun Qi did not have any romantic thoughts towards her. How could he be so nervous just because he was about to marry her? When she thought about how Crown Prince Yun Qi had mysteriously become her lover, she had a bold guess. The current Crown Prince Yun Qi was no longer the same Yun Qi. Gu Xingyin's eyes lit up. It was actually very easy to find out. "Your Highness," she called out softly. "It's getting late, we should rest." After saying this, she shyly lowered her head. Gu Xingyin was waiting for Yun Qi's reaction. No matter how slow Yun Qi was, he still understood what she meant by rest. Although the other party was a little beauty that he had a good impression of, but Yun Qi expressed that he really could not get over this hurdle in his heart. Chapter 9:26. Yun Qi tried his best to appear indifferent as he calmly looked at Gu Xingyin and said, "All right, then let's go to bed first." The two took off their outer clothes and used the warm water they had prepared beforehand to freshen up. Yun Qi prepared to go to bed and sleep. That's right, he literally went to bed to sleep. Gu Xingyin. She was almost certain now that the current Crown Prince Yun Qi was no longer the original Crown Prince Yun Qi. That fellow would not do such an abnormal thing. Then it could be explained. She did not know what kind of person her lover was in this life, but he had coincidentally transmigrated into Crown Prince Yun Qi's body and became her true husband. Gu Xingyin expressed that she was happy to see this bizarre development. However, on the wedding night, was it really okay to put his bride to the side and sleep alone? Before Yun Qi could close his eyes, he heard a low sobbing sound. It was very obvious that the sound came from the girl beside him. The sobbing was low and enduring. He only felt that just hearing this sound made his heart ache. Yun Qi opened his eyes and looked at Gu Xingyin. "What's wrong?" Gu Xingyin was sobbing softly. Hearing the question, she raised her head. "Your Highness, do you dislike me?" "Dislike? How could that be? I clearly like you so much." Yun Qi really wanted to say this. He did not understand why Gu Xingyin was crying until he realized his current identity. Yes, he was already Crown Prince Yun Qi and she was his crown princess. On the wedding night, the crown prince and the crown princess did not sleep together. If this spread out, everyone would probably laugh at the crown princess for not being able to win the crown prince's heart. She would have to bear such a great humiliation. Yun Qi felt a bit guilty. It was his fault for not thinking things through. He said with difficulty, "I only see that you are still young. Turley, I'm afraid it's not good for your body." Gu Xingyin blinked her moist eyes, as if she had never heard of this before. She looked at him in confusion. At this moment, her long and curly eyelashes were still wet with tears. Her small nose was red and the way she looked at people with her moist eyes was simply tempting to commit a crime. Yun Qi felt that his body, which had calmed down with great difficulty, began to stir again. However, his wife didn't realize it at all. She continued, There are imperial physicians checking my pulse regularly. Yesterday, the imperial physician even said that it's okay. Towards the end of her sentence, her gaze was somewhat evasive, and her voice was somewhat unclear. But Yun-Chi heard it clearly. What she meant was that her body was already strong enough to withstand sexual intercourse. Seeing that he still had no reaction, Gu Shengyin boldly reached out her hand and gently tugged at the corner of his shirt. This time, even the gods and Buddhas could not hold it in any longer. Yun-Chi flipped over and pressed down on her body. Gu Shengyin seemed to be shocked. She stared at him with her big peach blossom eyes, and there was some nervousness in her eyes. No matter how dignified and calm she appeared, she was still only a 16-year-old child. However, she probably didn't know that with her appearance and her expression, she was an existence that could easily seduce people into committing crimes. Yun-Chi leaned forward and gently kissed Gu Shengyin's eyes. In the future, don't show this kind of expression in front of any man, he softly said in her ear. Gu Shengyin obediently nodded. Then, she hesitantly said in a small voice, I'll only show it to your highness the crown prince. Yun-Chi's eyes darkened. She actually dared to seduce him. Chapter 927. They first went to the palace of the Emperor of Great Lai. The emperor looked very energetic. He had always been very satisfied with Su Chaohua as his daughter-in-law and rewarded her with many good things. Then they went to visit the Empress Dowager. This time they went at the right time. The Empress happened to be in the Empress Dowager's palace. Gu Shengyin bowed respectfully and offered a cup of tea. Seeing Gu Shengyin get up, Yun-Chi quickly helped her. The Empress picked up the teacup and hid the smile in her eyes. They were indeed young couples. She began to feel sorry for them. Similarly, the Empress Dowager with a loving face and the Empress with a smiling face both took out valuable greeting gifts. They chatted for a while. Seeing that the Empress Dowager was tired, the two sensibly asked to leave. Do you want to rest for a while? Yun-Chi saw that Gu Shengyin's face was not very good and asked considerately. He made a fuss late last night and she did not have a good rest. She had to wake up early in the morning to pay respects to the various palaces. Yun-Chi felt distressed when he thought about it. Gu Shengyin did feel that her waist and back were sore at this moment, especially a certain indescribable place that was even more uncomfortable. She glanced around. This was the Imperial Garden. The environment was beautiful. There was a pavilion not far away. It was good to rest for a while here. Seeing her nod, Yun-Chi directly held her hand and let her lean on his body for support. What was this like? Gu Shengyin wanted to break free. Your Highness, this is not appropriate. Yun-Chi raised his eyebrows. You are my crown princess. No matter what I do with you, it is appropriate. He didn't lower his voice when he said this, so the palace servants serving behind him naturally heard it. They all covered their mouths and smiled. The crown prince and the crown princess were really close. Gu Shengyin blushed and no longer struggled. The two walked into the pavilion together. Soon, the palace servants served tea and exquisite snacks. Looking at the thoughtful service and the beautiful and gentle little wife beside him, Yun-Chi suddenly felt that this time travel was not a bad thing. At the very least, he got a little wife that he really liked, didn't he? It was the turn of spring and summer. There were many rare flowers blooming in the Imperial Garden. When the breeze blew, there was a faint fragrance of flowers. Admiring the flowers in such an environment with her sweetheart was also a pleasant thing. Suddenly, a faint clamor came from not far away, disrupting the tranquility of this place. Yun-Chi frowned, and In-Fu, who was his personal attendant, hurried over. Which blind person couldn't see that His Highness the Crown Prince and Her Highness the Crown Prince Consort were here? Gu Shengyin, however, leisurely picked up the steaming hot tea. Oh, this is top-notch tribute tea. The taste is indeed not bad. She knew that something would happen later. Sure enough, In-Fu hurried over very quickly. He first glanced at Gu Shengyin cautiously before looking at his master. As the Crown Prince's trusted aide, In-Fu more or less knew about the matter between his master and Miss Lu. It was precisely because he knew this that he did not rashly chase them away. Yun-Chi glanced at him. Just say what you want. This meant that there was no need to hide from the crown princess. Ing Fu raised the status of the crown princess in His Highness the Crown Prince's heart. Then he respectfully replied, "Your Highness, Miss Lu came to the palace to visit Her Highness the Empress Dowager. Hearing that His Highness and Her Highness the Crown Princess are here, she wants to pay her respects." Miss Lu? There was only one Miss Lu who could be summoned by the Empress Dowager. That was Crown Prince Yun Qi's childhood sweetheart, Lu Shi from the left Prime Minister's residence. First 2 updates. The other updates would probably be updated at night. Gao Lingji had to get up at 6 in the morning and would only come back at night. Good night, everyone. Chapter 928. Yun Qi's brows furrowed tightly. As for this Lu Shi, he was not too willing to see her. Putting the past aside, Yun Qi didn't want to judge the ambiguous entanglement between the original Crown Prince Yun Qi and her. But since he came to this body, some things had to be cut off. Now that he had his own crown princess, he had to make it clear to Lu Shi and let it go. Yun Qi glanced at Gu Shengyin and was about to say that he would go take a look. Then, he saw a light yellow figure gracefully walking towards him. Yun Qi's face immediately turned ugly. Those who were familiar with him should know that although Yun Qi was usually kind, he was a tolerant leader to his subordinates. But that was only in private. When it came to work, he was definitely a strict boss. And now, he was very unhappy. In his eyes, these guards were the Crown Prince's guards. Knowing that the Crown Prince and Crown Princess were enjoying the scenery and had ordered that no one was allowed to come near, these guards still let Lu Shi in. They were completely unqualified in terms of professionalism. While Yun Qi was angry, Lu Shi had already walked over. She was followed by 2 servant girls. There were no servant girls from the palace, so she must have come out of the Empress Dowager's palace. "This subject greets Your Highness the Crown Prince." She gracefully bowed to Yun Qi and looked at him with a pair of beautiful eyes that seemed to be able to speak. There seemed to be thousands of words hidden in them. She didn't seem to notice Gu Shengyin beside Yun Qi at all. Gu Shengyin slowly took a sip of tea again. Was this a blatant demonstration to her? When Lu Shi came in, she saw Yun Qi's ugly expression. She didn't know that Yun Qi was angry because of her. She thought that he was unhappy because of his marriage with Su Chaohua like her. She was happy and couldn't help but look at Gu Shengyin. With just one look, she was hurt by the red wedding dress that the other party was wearing. She was now brother Yun Qi's crown princess. Su Chaohua lowered her head and thought resentfully, so what if she was the crown princess? The person that brother Yun Qi liked was not her at all. As she was thinking about this, she didn't realize that Yun Qi hadn't asked her to get up. Until Yun Qi's cold voice came from above. According to the rules of the left Prime Minister's residence, is there a need to salute the crown princess? Lu Shi looked at Yun Qi in shock, as if she could not believe that he had just said such heartless words. However, she was met with Yun Qi's cold eyes. In that gaze, there was no trace of the warmth and gentleness she was familiar with. Lu Shi suddenly realized that something seemed to be different. Was it because of Su Chaohua? She subconsciously looked at Gu Shengyin, who had been sitting quietly by the side. Gu Shengyin sat calmly and looked at her with raised eyebrows. What's wrong? Does Miss Lu have a problem with this consort? I don't dare. Lu Shi lowered her head and bowed to Gu Shengyin. This time, Yun Qi finally relented and allowed her to stand up. Gu Shengyin looked at Lu Shi with a faint smile. Miss Lu, why did you come here in such a hurry? Of course, it was to see brother Yun Qi. Lu Shi didn't dare to say this. She could only look at Yun Qi for help, hoping that he could say something for her. Chapter 929. However, Yun Qi only looked at Gu Shengyin with tenderness in his eyes and did not notice her gaze at all. Lu Shi bit her lip and finally curtsied to Gu Shengyin, saying, This subject was summoned by the Empress Dowager. I was passing by the Imperial Garden and heard that His Highness the Crown Prince and Her Highness the Crown Prince Consort were enjoying the scenery here, so I came to pay my respects. She felt that by saying this, she was already admitting defeat. But Gu Shengyin did not intend to let it go so easily. If she really let Lu Shi pass so easily, where would Yun Qi's prestige as the crown prince be? Where would her face as the crown prince consort be? Gu Shengyin gently put the teacup in her hand on the table. The teacup and the marble table made a crisp sound. This sound passed through the air and seemed to reach Lu Shi's heart. Her heart suddenly started beating very fast. Gu Shengyin put away the smile on her face. This consort and His Highness the Crown Prince are enjoying the scenery here and are strictly not to be disturbed by unrelated people. Did Miss Lu not hear anyone mention this? She changed the topic. If Miss Lu has not heard anyone mention this, then this consort wants to see which daring servant dares to not care about the Eastern Palace's decree. Lu Shi's face turned red and white. Gu Shengyin's words seemed to be scolding the guards, but in reality, she was talking about her. She was just short of pointing at her nose and saying that she did not know the rules. Ing Fu, who was acting like a wooden stake, carefully looked at Yun Qi's expression. Seeing that he did not have the slightest intention of standing up for Lu Shi, he had a clearer understanding of the importance of these two in his master's heart. At this time, he stood up and said slowly, replying to the Crown Prince consort, "This servant reminded Miss Lu that you and His Highness were enjoying the scenery here and were not allowed to barge in. But Miss Lu insisted on coming in. Miss Lu has a noble status, so the guards did not dare to do anything." Noble status? It was noble in the past His Highness the Crown Prince's heart. Gu Shengyin glanced at Yun Qi with a calm expression. How does His Highness the Crown Prince feel that this should be handled? Yun Qi looked at her dotingly. You can decide for yourself on this kind of thing. Lu Shi's eyes were deeply hurt by the gentle smile on his face. In the past, this smile had always been directed at her. He had even said that he would soon accept her into the Eastern Palace. Why is everything so different now? Could it be because they were getting married? Gu Shengyin didn't care what Lu Shi thought. She was very satisfied with Yun Qi's attitude. She said slowly, "If that's the case, then Miss Lu should go home and learn the rules. First, cut the principles for women 10 times. If you still don't understand the rules, I'll have to take some extreme measures." She actually dared to punish him. Lu Shi suddenly raised her head. It was not difficult to repeat the principles for women 10 times, but the key was the punishment from the palace. If she was really punished by the Crown Prince consort to copy the principles for women, her reputation would be ruined. Everyone would know that the young miss of the left Prime Minister's manor did not follow the rules. In this way, she would definitely become the laughingstock of the noble ladies' circle. Lu Shi raised her voice. "Your Highness the Crown Prince, Her Highness the Empress Dowager specially asked someone to bring me into the palace." Gu Shengyin interrupted her. "In that case, Miss Lu, to show your filial piety, why don't you copy it as well? Also, copy the Diamond Sutra 10 times. She wanted to use Her Highness the Empress Dowager to suppress her? Gu Shengyin expressed that she was not afraid of this. For chapters. Gigi's eyes were very red and swollen because of a minor operation today. It was very painful and she could not open her eyes. I will try my best to write more chapters today. If I can't take it anymore, I will make up for the chapters that are less than 8 chapters in 2 or 3 days. Chapter 930. She hardened her tone. "Miss Lu, be careful with your words." Lu Shi was shocked, and then she heard Gu Shengyin's voice coming over unhurriedly. "The Empress Dowager brought you into the palace with good intentions. Why did Miss Lu make a mistake and want to implicate the Empress Dowager?" Lu Shi glared at Gu Shengyin. She clearly didn't mean that. Why did it have a completely different meaning in Su Chaohua's mouth? She just wanted to use the Empress Dowager to make Su Chaohua afraid and not punish her easily. Sure enough, Su Chaohua, this woman, not only was she scheming, she was also very eloquent. The more Lu Shi thought about it, the more she felt wronged. That's right. There was also Brother Yunqi. He would definitely be able to see Su Chaohua's true colors. Thinking of this, Lu Shi looked at Yunqi expectantly with a pitiful look. Yunqi didn't like girls with this kind of character. In the society he lived in, women were not worse than men. He even had many strong female business competitors. Therefore, Yunqi had always admired those kind of generous, confident, and capable women. Yunqi felt that he couldn't appreciate this kind of soft and weak girl who seemed like she would be blown away by the wind. His little wife was still the best. Yunqi smiled as he watched his little wife suppressing people until they were speechless without any change in expression. He was extremely proud in his heart. This was his little wife. Seeing that Yunqi was indifferent to her, Lu Shi's eyes finally turned red and tears fell. She couldn't help but call out, "Brother Yunqi, Yingfu." Why did he have to stand so close to her? Would he be silenced if he knew too much? Yunqi. Was this Lu Shi stupid? Gu Shengyin. Lu Shi only called out to Yunqi affectionately and stopped talking. Clearly, she was waiting for him to express something. Lu Shi originally didn't want to be like this. She had already agreed with Crown Prince Yunqi that their relationship would always be hidden. Even if she entered the residence in the future, she wouldn't be too favored. All of this was to protect her. Although she was a little unwilling at that time, she felt very sweet because the person she liked was also thinking for her. But today, she didn't know why. Seeing Gu Shengyin and Yunqi's affectionate appearance, her heart seemed to feel empty. Her intuition told her that if she didn't fight for it, she might never get what she wanted. So, she called out to brother Yunqi. Yunqi, however, looked at Gu Shengyin very awkwardly. In his heart, he originally intended to keep this matter a secret from Gu Shengyin forever. After all, this was not something he had caused. He still planned to find a time to meet Lu Shi in private and explain that everyone would go their separate ways from this bridge. He already had a concubine. He should find a suitable. Who knew that before he could start all his preparations, Lu Shi would reveal it herself. Such an intimate address, such an intimate way. Even Yunqi himself wouldn't believe that there was nothing fishy between the two of them. Gu Shengyin, who should have been the most shocked, was the calmest among the three of them at this moment. She stood up and said, "It seems that your highness has some private matters to deal with. I'll take my leave first." She finished speaking and was about to leave. Yunqi subconsciously grabbed her hand and said, "Don't go." Gu Shengyin struggled slightly and said, "Your highness, it's not that I'm pretentious, but at this moment, I'm not in a position to stand here. There are only 5 chapters today. Gigi will make up for the 3 chapters later. Also, thank you for your concern." Gigi read the comments. And I Meng might have misunderstood. I'm not sick. I did it myself. I just wanted to look better, but it hurts. I regret it so much. Chapter 931. Judging from his appearance, he was clearly angry. Yunqi was not a hothead. He knew that he would be a fool if he really let his wife leave at this time. He looked at Gu Shengyin and said seriously, "The one who should leave is not you. If it was not her, then it would be someone else." Lu Shi's face instantly turned pale. Yunqi's words were equivalent to making a choice between the two of them. And she was the one who was abandoned. Lu Shi's eyes reddened and finally, she could not hold back her tears. Her sweet memories and dreams of glory and wealth seemed to have all turned into bubbles at this moment. No, it shouldn't be like this. Clearly, everything was not like this a few days ago. Gu Shengyin did not seem to care much about the dispute between the two of them. She did not even look at Lu Shi, as if she did not care about this woman at all. Instead, she looked at Yunqi. "Your Highness, this is your Highness' private matter. It is better for your Highness to solve it yourself." She put her hands in her sleeves and her wide sleeves fluttered in the wind, looking unspeakably grand and noble. "No matter what, it is better to solve this matter as soon as possible. Otherwise, if this matter is spread out, I am afraid that it will not be good for your Highness' reputation." Yunqi was speechless. He did not hold on to Gu Shengyin anymore and only silently watched her figure walk further and further away. "Your Highness, how can you leave?" Only after she walked far away did Gu Shengyin's personal palace maid, Kai He, worriedly ask Gu Shengyin. At this time, how could the crown princess create a chance for His Highness and Miss Lu to be alone? Gu Shengyin glanced at her and smiled faintly. "Go and tell the kitchen that I want to eat lighter tonight." Kai He saw that she did not care at all and became even more anxious. But her master's matters were not something she could manage. She sighed and bowed to Gu Shengyin before retreating. Gu Shengyin casually strolled around the garden alone. Of course, she knew what Kai He was worried about. She was afraid that something would happen between the two of them. However, if the two of them really needed her to watch over them at all times to prevent certain things from happening, then what was the point of being a married couple? Moreover, she had enough confidence in her man. Her choice to leave was just to give Yunqi a chance to solve the mess left behind by the original owner. She didn't want to have to clean up the mess that Yunqi left behind in the past. The scene returned to the pavilion. Ying Fu had already seen the opportunity and walked not far away. He maintained a distance where he could react in time but couldn't hear the contents of his master's conversation clearly. At this moment, there were only two people left. Without any outsiders, Lu Shi's expression changed. Other than her previous pitiful appearance, her eyes were filled with deep affection. "Big brother Yunqi," she called out with sincerity. Yunqi frowned. "Miss Lu, please pay attention to your etiquette. My name is not something that anyone can say." Lu Shi looked at him with a pale face. "Your Highness the Crown Prince, have you forgotten the oath between us?" Yunqi felt a headache coming on. But he had taken over Crown Prince Yunqi's body, so he had to solve the problems he left behind, whether it was good or bad. But for him to lose his temper at a girl, he couldn't do such a thing. Moreover, with Lu Shi like this, the former Crown Prince Yunqi was not innocent. He thought about his words and said as tactfully as possible, "Miss Lu, you should forget about the past." Chapter 932. Yunqi thought that he had already said it quite straightforwardly. "Now that I am married, Ro, Chaohua is a good wife. I will respect and love her well in the future. I was young and frivolous in the past. I have let you down." Yunqi hesitated for a moment, but still took the blame for the former Crown Prince Yunqi. He said seriously to Lu Shi, "You are also a noble young lady. You should find a husband who will dote on you, love you, and protect you." He said this from the bottom of his heart. To Yunqi, he really could not understand those girls who were rushing to be concubines. Dali emphasized the difference between the legitimate wife and the concubine. The status of a concubine was only slightly higher than that of a servant. Even if she married into the royal family and had a status, so what if she had a noble status? If she was not the legal wife, no matter how dignified she was, in the eyes of the real aristocrats, she was still just a concubine. Lu Shi widened her eyes and looked at Yunqi, as if trying hard to find a trace of him joking on his face. But there was none. The other party's expression was very serious, and there was no trace of him faking it. He really wanted to distance himself from her. Lu Shi finally cried out. This time, it was different from her previous pitiful appearance. It was a completely broken cry. "No, it's not like that. Brother Yunqi, you obviously like me so much. You even said that you would marry me as a concubine. You don't love that bitch Su Chaohua. You said that you were just acting with her and that you would destroy her in the future. I don't believe it." Yunqi's face was gloomy. When he saw Lu Shi like this, he felt some pity in his heart. It seemed that this Miss Lu was indeed sincere to Yunqi. But when he heard the latter part, the pity in his heart was completely replaced by anger. Who gave this woman the guts to make up stories about his Ru? That's right. President Yun had a bad habit, and that was to protect his own. Anyone who was acknowledged by him would be taken under his wings. Not to mention his own wife. In Yunqi's heart, his little wife was absolutely good in every way. He could not tolerate anyone saying anything wrong. This Lu Shi kept calling her a bitch. She was simply challenging his bottom line. Yunqi immediately said without any trace of politeness, "Miss Lu, offending the royal family is a serious crime." This time, I took it as Miss Lu's mind was in a mess and spoke without thinking. I don't want to hear such words a second time. Otherwise, the consequences are definitely not what Miss Lu wants to see. He felt that he had already said what he needed to say, so he stood up with a flick of his sleeve. "Oh right, Miss Lu, don't forget the words that the Crown Prince consort left behind." Ying Fu didn't know what happened between the two of them in the pavilion. He only saw that the two of them kept a safe distance from each other and didn't have any intimate behavior. He already had a guess in his heart. At this moment he saw his master walking out while Miss Lu seemed to be crying alone in the pavilion. Was he done? Furthermore, from the looks of it, he was rather unhappy. Ingfu was shocked. As Yun Qi's confidant, he already knew the position of Miss Lu in the Crown Prince's heart. It could be said that if it wasn't for the prophecy about the fate of the phoenix on the Crown Prince consort, the Crown Prince consort would have been someone else. However, the Crown Prince consort hadn't even married into the Eastern Palace for a day before His Highness the Crown Prince cut off all contact with Miss Lu. This method was truly admirable. Chapter 933. As the Crown Princess, there were some things that Gu Shengyin didn't need to be instructed. Someone would report it to her. For example, the Crown Prince and Miss Lu of the left Prime Minister's mansion didn't talk for long in the pavilion. The Crown Prince seemed to leave unhappily, and Miss Lu sat alone in the pavilion for a long time. In fact, she didn't sit for a long time, but cried for a long time. Gu Shengyin was very satisfied. What happened in the Imperial Garden didn't escape the ears of those in power in the Imperial Palace. When the Emperor heard the report, he seemed very happy. The Crown Prince is quite decisive this time. In my opinion, after the wedding, he should live a good life with the Crown Princess and let me hold the little Imperial grandson as soon as possible. Although the previous Crown Prince Yunqi and Lu Shi thought that they did it secretly, what in the world could be hidden from the most powerful people in the world? The Emperor didn't interfere because this matter was just a trivial matter to him. As long as the Crown Prince could handle it well, he wouldn't interfere. But now he was very satisfied with the result of the Crown Prince's handling. After all, Su Chaohua was the Crown Princess he had personally appointed since birth. After so many years of attention, he had developed a lot of feelings for this daughter-in-law. Naturally, he still hoped that the Crown Prince and the Crown Princess could be together and the harem would be stable. Only then could the man have enough energy to manage his own affairs. Just like himself, he had a good empress and never needed to worry about the harem. When the empress heard the report, she was full of smiles. The Crown Prince was her only child. Since Su Chaohua was the Crown Princess from a young age, she often brought her to the Imperial Palace to play. She didn't have a daughter and had long regarded this future daughter-in-law as half a daughter. Naturally, she didn't want to see her wronged. Moreover, as the empress, no matter how generous she was still the legal wife and naturally disliked those concubines. Seeing that someone jumped out to make trouble just after the Crown Prince's wedding, the empress was displeased with Miss Lu of the left Prime Minister's mansion. Mu Jin, take out my pair of Eastern pearl head ornaments and send it to the Crown Princess in the Eastern Palace. Such a dazzling thing is perfect for the bride. She ordered her chief palace maid. Eastern pearl head noodles? Mu Jin was shocked. The Eastern Pearl was a tribute from a small country in the south a few years ago. It was the only one of its kind. It just so happened that it was not far from the Empress's Thousand Autumns festival, so the Emperor ordered the manufacturing department to specially create such a unique head ornament for the Empress. At that time, all the concubines behind her were envious. Her Majesty the Empress is purposely giving face to the Crown Princess. Mu Jin lowered her head and agreed. However, the atmosphere in the Empress Dowager's palace was not so good. The Empress Dowager was from the Lu family. In terms of seniority, she was the aunt of the left Prime Minister and Lu Shi's great-aunt. As the most outstanding girl in this generation of the Lu family, the Empress Dowager had spent a lot of effort on her. All these years, the Empress Dowager would occasionally invite Lu Shi into the palace to accompany her in the name of missing the younger generation. She was more or less trying to cultivate a relationship with the Crown Prince. He was already old and couldn't protect the Lu family for long. The Emperor was not his biological son, so he would not have much affection for the Lu family. And the Crown Prince was the future monarch. If the future monarch's heart was with the Lu family, it would naturally be best. However, with the Crown Prince consort Su Chaohua around, no matter what, Lu Shi was naturally a head shorter than her. Chapter 934. The Empress Dowager had heard Lu Shi say that she had a special relationship with the Crown Prince. This made the Empress Dowager very happy. As for whether the Lu family's legitimate daughter was the Empress Dowager, the Empress Dowager herself was not the Empress Dowager. She was promoted to the empress after the death of the late Empress Yuan. She did not care much about this. As long as the emperor's concubines could capture the emperor's heart, anyone could ascend to the supreme position, wasn't it? She had spent too much effort on this grandniece. Unfortunately, what happened in the imperial garden today clearly told everyone that this miss of the left prime minister's residence did not have much status in the crown prince's heart. Everyone saw the crown prince personally supporting the crown princess and had a deep friendship with the newly married crown princess. Moreover, the crown princess was deeply loved by the emperor and the empress. No one could shake her status. As for Miss Lu, no one in the palace was not a smart person. Since the crown prince did not want to have anything to do with her, then she had nothing to do with the crown prince. It was said that the Empress Dowager's show and palace had a new tea set that day. Gu Shengyin had just returned to the East Palace when she heard that the crown prince had returned and had been waiting for her. Gu Shengyin entered his bedroom and saw Yun Qi sitting upright on a chair. His expression was calm and one could not tell if he was happy or angry. As soon as she entered, she waved her hand and the palace servants who were serving her tactfully retreated. The door was silently closed. As soon as the palace servants left, Yun Qi's pretense of being aloof instantly disappeared. He quickly stood up and opened his arms to embrace Gu Shengyin, who was about to bow to him. "I'm sorry." Holding his little wife, his nose was filled with the unique fragrance of her hair. Yun Qi whispered these words. Gu Shengyin's heart softened. This matter actually had nothing to do with the current Yun Qi, but he apologized to her because of this. "Your Highness." Gu Shengyin wanted to say that she did not mind, but suddenly stopped. No wife would not mind this kind of thing. Su Chaohua did not know that this was not the real Yun Qi. In the end, she only raised her hand and gently patted Yun Qi's hand. Yun Qi maintained the same word count and said, "Ru, listen to me." He sat here and thought for a long time, and finally decided to tell her everything. The matter between Yun Qi and Lu Shi had really happened. Instead of letting others use this as a tool to drive a wedge between husband and wife, it was better for him, the person involved, to explain it clearly. In the past, Crown Prince Yun Qi and Lu Shi were only at the initial stage of understanding and did not do anything excessive. Yun Qi slowly talked about Crown Prince Yun Qi and Lu Shi. After all, he had been a leader for many years and was well versed in the art of language. The originally sentimental love story, under his narration, turned into a slightly ambiguous love story between a young man. However, he really wasn't lying. Gu Shengyin, if I didn't know the original plot, I would have thought that Crown Prince Yun Qi and Lu Shi were purely admiring each other. However, she was already very satisfied. This man was willing to tell her everything, which was already the greatest sincerity and frankness. The two kept hugging each other like this until Yun Qi saw Gu Shengyin's tired face. He was secretly annoyed at his carelessness and sat down with Gu Shengyin. He did not let go of her, so in this way, Gu Shengyin was hugged by him and directly sat on his lap. Chapter 935. From the perspective of a modern person, this posture was nothing special for a couple who had a good relationship, let alone a legal couple. But this was a conservative and feudal ancient time. Yun Qi's action could be said to be quite bold and unrestrained. Gu Shengyin blushed very cooperatively and struggled to get up and leave. However, Yun Qi's hand was like iron around her waist, and she couldn't break free at all. Yun Qi chuckled and looked at his little wife's pink and shy appearance, only thinking that she was very cute. He couldn't help but tighten his arms a little, and felt satisfied to feel that their bodies were tightly pressed together. "Sorry, I forgot that you weren't feeling well and made you stand for so long." As soon as these words reached Gu Shengyin's ears, it successfully caused another wave of blush. This man knew best why she was feeling unwell. Realizing that if he continued to tease, his little wife in his arms would smoke, Yun Qi finally straightened his expression. "Ru, I said so much to you just now because I wanted to tell you." Yun Qi gently lifted Gu Shengyin's lowered head with his hand, making her look at him. "I am your husband, you are my wife. We are one, and we will be together forever, all the way until the end of our lives. I won't hide anything from you, And I also hope that if you have any dissatisfaction or doubts in your heart, you can tell me directly. I will tell you everything. I like you, Ruru. This confession was simply unexpected. Even if Gu Xingyin was an experienced driver who had experienced many worlds, she had to admit that at this moment, she was suddenly captivated by Yun Qi's sincere confession. After saying these words, Yun Qi waited for his wife's response. For him, whether he was the president of his previous life or the crown prince of this body, it was the first time that he said such words of love to someone else. He was still a little nervous. However, after waiting for a while, he only saw his little wife staring at him blankly, and her eyes were a little red. Was she so moved that she became silly? Yun Qi didn't know whether to laugh or cry. At the same time, he felt that his wife in this state was too delicious. He couldn't help but feel restless in his heart. With the advantage of this natural posture, Yun Qi lowered his head and accurately kissed Gu Xingyin's sweet red lips. The palace guards outside only knew that His Highness the Crown Prince and Her Highness the Crown Prince Consort had stayed in the bedroom for a long time. When the Crown Princess came out, her eyes were red, her cheeks were red, and even her lips were red. On the other hand, His Highness the Crown Prince, who was standing at the side, looked pleased with himself. He even thoughtfully supported the Crown Princess's body. Anyone with a discerning eye could tell at a glance that something had happened between the newlyweds. The palace servants all pursed their lips and smiled. Gu Xingyin got angry when she saw Yun Qi like this. Just now in the palace, he actually let her, thinking of something that couldn't be said, she raised her head and fiercely glared at Yun Qi. Her eyes were the standard peach blossom eyes. Usually, they looked especially watery and seductive. At this moment, there was still the lingering charm of lust in the corners of her eyes. They were big and bright and charming. After being glared at like this, the heat in Yun Qi's body that had calmed down with great difficulty almost surged up again. Really, he face-bombed. This time, he had really fallen for her. Chapter 936. The Crown Princess and the Crown Prince's days were very sweet. Even the consorts and concubines in the palace looked like they were blinded every time they mentioned this young couple. How to put it, it was really, here were a few examples. One day, the Crown Prince consort and a concubine met by chance in the imperial garden and admired the scenery together. After chatting for a while, the Crown Prince's trusted chief steward, Eunuch Fu, came over. When he saw the Crown Prince consort, he sighed in relief. His Highness said that you usually take 2 cups of tea's time for a walk at this time every day. He was a bit worried that you haven't returned to the palace today, so he had this servant come over to take a look. Gu Xingyin smiled at the concubine in embarrassment, but the sweetness in her smile couldn't be concealed. The concubine, who was inexplicably stuffed with dog food, she could only show an understanding smile and said with sincere envy, His Highness the Crown Prince and Her Highness the Crown Prince Consort have such a good relationship. Then Gu Xingyin excused herself and followed Fu back to the Eastern Palace. The concubine was left behind to look at the beautiful flowers in the garden and instantly felt that everything had lost its color. One day, the Crown Prince Consort was talking with the Empress in her palace. 2 hours later, the Crown Prince rushed over and paid his respects to the Empress. The Empress was in a good mood when she saw the young couple flirting in front of her. She couldn't help but tease, I had Chow Hua chat with this old woman. Are you afraid that I will eat you? Yun Qi widened his eyes and said solemnly, How can that be? I just missed Imperial Mother and came to visit you. Then he quietly whispered in Gu Xingyin's ear, I have already ordered the kitchen to make the pot you mentioned last time. Later, I will tell Imperial Mother that we won't be eating here and will go back to eat. But his voice was neither loud nor soft, just enough for the Empress to hear. The Empress. Seeing them like this, she suddenly remembered the time when she and the Emperor had just gotten married. As a young couple, the two of them had once had intimate days. The Empress scolded jokingly, Okay, I know what you mean. Chow Hua, hurry and go back with this guy so that you don't annoy me here. One day, the Crown Prince Consort was suddenly invited to the palace by the Empress Dowager. The Empress Dowager smiled kindly, completely like a tolerant and kind elder. For the entire time it took to drink a cup of tea, they were praising Gu Shengyin for being virtuous, kind, and virtuous, as well as being in harmony with the crown prince. After he finished speaking, the topic suddenly changed to Gu Shengyin's stomach. He said that people who were old wanted to see the birth of a new life in the royal family. Gu Shengyin maintained her perfect smile the whole time, or lowered her head shyly, but she didn't say anything. The Empress Dowager also said that the Eastern Palace seemed to be a little too quiet. She wanted to send a few people over to serve them. Gu Shengyin was about to find a reason to refuse when Yun Qi appeared in the palace. "Thank you for your concern, Imperial Grandmother." Yun Qi smiled sincerely, but his words made the Empress Dowager choke. "I also feel that the Eastern Palace is a little too quiet. I'm trying my best to give you a grandson." He emphasized the word direct, as if he was reminding him of something. The Empress Dowager's expression changed slightly. She just smiled and changed the topic, no longer mentioning the matter of adding another person. And so on. 3 months after the wedding in the Eastern Palace, everyone in the palace knew that the relationship between the Crown Prince and the Crown Prince consort was really good. Many women from noble families often entered the palace. Naturally, this news had also spread outside the palace. Some people were gratified by this, but there were also people who crumpled their handkerchiefs when they heard the news. Chapter 937. Lu Shi was the one who crumpled the handkerchief. Yun Qi's words that day were too heartless, and coupled with the punishment the Crown Princess gave her, she stayed in the left Prime Minister's residence for 3 whole months. However, this didn't mean that she gave up. Lu Shi didn't want to believe that Yun Qi would have a change of heart in such a short time. She felt that Yun Qi must need the Crown Princess's help now, so he had to pretend that he was deeply in love with the Crown Princess and cut off all ties with her. Regardless of whether this was true or not, Lu Shi believed that this was the truth. She didn't want to accept that Yun Qi fell in love with the Crown Princess, Su Chaohua. She also didn't want to accept that Yun Qi didn't like her for no reason. In Lu Shi's heart, she always felt that she would be the Crown Prince's woman, and because of her relationship with the Crown Prince, she would become the most noble woman in the world sooner or later. Therefore, she didn't want to accept any accidents. Even if the Crown Prince really had deep feelings for the Crown Princess, she didn't want to give up. Since she could make the Crown Prince like her once, then she was confident that she could make the Crown Prince like her a second time. In 2 days, it would be the Empress's birthday. As the legitimate daughter of the left Prime Minister's residence and the Empress Dowager's legitimate grandniece, Lu Shi naturally had the right to attend. Not only did she want to go, but she also wanted to dress up beautifully so that everyone would be shocked. She wanted to regain brother Yun Qi's heart. "Your Highness, what do you think of this gown?" Saiha took out a silver-red luxurious robe and showed it to Gu Shengyin. The Empress's birthday naturally couldn't be underestimated. Her Highness was a newlywed, so most of the robes she wore were of a more festive color. Gu Shengyin shook her head. "I remember that the manufacturing company sent a purple robe over a few days ago. I'll take that one." Saiha recalled that the purple robe happened to be a very popular style recently. Both the color and style were grand and noble, suitable for more grand occasions. She nodded. At this time, Yun Qi came in. Seeing the robe in Saiha's hands, he knew what was going on. He said with a smile, "Picking out tomorrow's clothes?" "Kai," he replied, "replying to your Highness, Her Highness has taken a liking to that heavy purple robe." She said this because the Crown Prince was also present when the manufacturing company sent it over a few days ago. Furthermore, he personally praised the robe for its beauty. Sure enough, Yun Qi's eyes lit up and he nodded. "That's right." Seeing that His Highness the Crown Prince and Her Highness the Crown Prince Consort seemed to have something to say, he sensibly retreated. "What's the matter?" Gu Shengyin turned her head and asked Yun Qi. She just sat there lazily and didn't get up to bow. The two of them had been together for the past 3 months, and they had become more and more casual. Yun Qi, on the other hand, was quite happy to see such a change. In other words, this was the effect he wanted. Gu Shengyin's behavior made him feel that his little wife was slowly treating him as her husband instead of the Crown Prince. He pulled Gu Shengyin into his arms and sighed in satisfaction. It's nothing. I just missed you. He had a few small habits. First, he wasn't used to having an extra third wheel waiting on him when he was alone with Gu Shengyin. Second, he especially liked to have physical contact with his wife, especially hugging. He felt that hugging his little wife felt very good. It was like hugging his entire world. Chapter 938. Gu Shengyin suddenly thought of something. She was about to say something when she suddenly stopped. Clearly, she was hesitant about what she was about to say. Yunqi gently kissed her hair and asked gently, "What's wrong?" Gu Shengyin thought of what he said before. They had to be honest with each other about everything. She still asked, "We have been married for so long, but there has been no news. Do you feel pressured?" Yunqi took a while to realize what Gu Shengyin meant by news. Children. However, this silly girl didn't know that a large part of the reason why she wasn't pregnant was because of him. Even though Yunqi didn't know much about this, he knew that giving birth was a big deal for a woman. Especially in this ancient era where medical technology was relatively backward, it was equivalent to taking a trip to the gates of hell. She was only 16 years old. Young girls would be in more danger during childbirth. He even secretly consulted the imperial physician about this. The imperial physician thought that the crown prince was in a hurry to have an heir, and told him all the things he should pay attention to. This included some foods that were best avoided because eating those foods would affect fertility. Yunqi secretly had the small kitchen in the Eastern Palace make some dishes. The small kitchen in the Eastern Palace and the recipes of the crown prince and the crown princess were absolutely confidential. Naturally, they couldn't be leaked. Therefore, no one thought that the crown prince was using his own method to prevent the crown princess from giving birth to an heir too early. Yunqi's first reaction when he heard this was, did someone use this to make Ru feel wronged? His expression turned cold as he asked, did someone gossip in front of you? Gu Shengyin shook her head. No, it's just my own guess. Yunqi relaxed and hugged her tighter. He said with a smile, it's nothing. How long has it been since we got married? No one would be stupid enough to talk about this. He was afraid that Gu Shengyin would think too much, so he continued, don't worry. On the contrary, I think it's good that we are like this now. With a child, you won't have any extra energy to accompany me. When he said this, he was like an ordinary husband hugging his wife and acting coquettishly. Where was the dignity of a crown prince of a country? Gu Shengyin's heart was filled with infinite sweetness by these undisguised words of love. Yunqi continued, also, I heard from the imperial physician that having a child too early is not good for the body. I'm not in a hurry either. Let's take it slow. Murmurs could be faintly heard from the bedchamber. Occasionally, the crown prince consort's happy laughter could be heard. Obviously, the two masters were chatting happily. Kai-he raised her head to look at the sky. Yes, there were no clouds in the sky. It was a beautiful day. The Empress's Thousand Autumns Festival had arrived amidst the meticulous preparations of the manufacturing department. As her daughter-in-law, Gu Shengyin naturally came to the palace early. Chao Hua is here. The Empress was dressed splendidly today. She was wearing a luxurious golden robe embroidered with phoenixes, and the nine-tailed pearl phoenix hairpin on her head was shining brightly. The Empress today was so beautiful that no one dared to look at her directly. It's Muhu's Thousand Autumns Festival. Aken naturally has to be the first person to congratulate Muhu. Gu Shengyin smiled mischievously. Finishing, she looked at the Empress and said in a plaintive voice, Aken specially dressed up for today, but standing in front of Muhu, who can see Urchin's figure? The Empress couldn't help but laugh at this compliment. Finishing, Gu Shengyin solemnly bowed to the Empress. Aken wishes Muhu's magnificence to last forever. Chapter 939. When all the concubines and madams came to the Empress's palace, they saw the Empress and the Crown Princess talking and laughing. It was rumored that the Empress and the Crown Princess had a very good relationship, as if they were biological mother and daughter. Those madams thought that it was an exaggeration, but now it seemed that it was true. Today, Lu Shi entered the palace with her mother, the left Prime Minister's wife. She had put in a lot of effort to dress up. The Empress's birthday was naturally not a brainless dress-up. She was dressed in a festive manner, as if she was at a funeral. However, this celebration was also particular. There were only so many bright colors. How to make oneself stand out from a group of people was an extremely difficult task. The left Prime Minister's wife had originally chosen a red gown for her daughter. On such an occasion, red was the most appropriate color. Of course, it was also difficult to show off in the crowd. The left Prime Minister's wife was an intelligent woman. This could be seen from the fact that the left Prime Minister's residence had never had any problems and her excellent reputation in the capital. Today, the Empress was the main character, and there was also the Crown Princess who had just gotten married. She did not want her daughter to be the focus of everyone's attention on such an occasion. Unfortunately, she did not appreciate her mother's kindness. When Madame Lu saw her daughter walking out of the courtyard, her gaze paused. She was wearing a light purple gown that perfectly displayed her slender figure. She had exquisite makeup on her face, and her hair was decorated with light tassels. It was gorgeous and did not lose the charm of a girl. It was beautiful, but it was too prickly. Madame Lu subconsciously frowned, but looking at the time, it was too late to go back and change. She could only bring her daughter into the carriage. Why didn't you listen to mother's advice? Madame Lu sighed. She had given birth to 2 sons before getting this daughter. She usually treated her like an eyeball and was very precious. This caused She to have a domineering personality. She smiled gently, but her tone was coquettish. Mother, I don't know how many people are wearing the red gown that you chose for me today. I don't want to bump into them. Seeing the pride and anticipation in Lu's eyes, Madame Lu sighed. As a mother, she more or less understood her daughter's thoughts. The Crown Prince already had a Crown Princess, and it was rumored that the relationship between the couple was very good. She had advised her daughter many times to stop thinking about other things, but this daughter of hers always changed the subject. She was an experienced person, so how could she not know the thoughts hidden under her daughter's gentle appearance? However, the Crown Princess had just gotten married, and it was rumored that His Highness the Crown Prince had been staying overnight in the Crown Princess's bedroom every day. To be so powerful, he must not be a simple character. She hid the worry in her heart and only instructed She to keep a low profile in the palace and not be in the limelight. She agreed on the surface, but no one knew what she was thinking. Gu Shengyin sat next to the Empress, smiling as she accepted the compliments of the noble madams. Her Highness the Crown Prince Consort's outer robe is truly a work of art. A Marchioness praised with a smile. Purple was not a color that was easy to control. Too much of it would make it vulgar, and too little of it would make it difficult to suppress one's aura. Therefore, there were not many people wearing purple today. Among these people, whether it was in terms of the finesse of the clothing or the rarity of the material, Gu Shengyin's robe was naturally the best. Gu Shengyin maintained a warm and reserved smile as she chatted freely with the madams surrounding her. Chapter 940. Hearing this question, she seemed to be very happy as she looked at the Empress and smiled. Is that so? I also feel that this robe is very beautiful. Imperial Mother specially ordered the manufacturing company to make it for me. After she said this, the people around her flattered that the Empress and the Crown Prince Consort were closer than biological mother and daughter. When she followed her mother into the palace, she noticed the most lively place in the hall. The 2 noblest women in Great Lai were surrounded by everyone, but she did not look at the dignified Empress. Her gaze was fixed on Gu Shengyin. She was also wearing purple. Gu Shengyin seemed to have sensed the intense gaze of this consciousness and looked in this direction from afar. She subconsciously puffed out her chest and raised her head. She was not willing to lower her head to Su Chaohua at any time. Unfortunately, Gu Shengyin did not seem to notice her. Her gaze casually swept over her face and then looked away as if she did not see anything. This was more excessive than any provocation. What was the greatest arrogance the enemy had towards you? It was not contempt, but complete disregard. She could not help but clench her hands tightly. No matter how she endured it on her face, there was still a trace of indignation. Lu Furen, who was walking beside her, sensitively sensed that her daughter's mood was not right. She reached out and patted her arm, saying in a low voice, "This is the Empress Palace. No matter what you think, you cannot make any mistakes." But there was a calm smile on her face. She returned to her senses and forced a smile. She walked to her seat with Lu Furen. Some of the Furens who were on good terms came over to talk. "The Fu's Miss Lu is becoming more and more beautiful. I don't know which family's son will be lucky enough to marry such a beautiful woman in the future." A familiar Furen joked. She lowered her head shyly. Another madam saw the clothes on Shi's body clearly. "The clothes on Miss Lu's body are quite unique." She looked at Shi with an uncontrollable shock in her eyes. She could not help but smile when she heard this. She did not waste an hour of her meticulous dressing up. But when she looked up, she saw Gu Shengyin in front of her. Unlike the slightly lighter purple on his body, the other party's robes were a dense deep purple. Such a solemn and imposing color would not be able to suppress the aura of an ordinary person, making them appear very old-fashioned. However, Gu Shengyin used her own aura to suppress the robe. This dark purple color fully displayed the advantages of her appearance. Her skin was whiter than snow, and her facial features were exquisite and beautiful. She was not overshadowed by the Empress, who was also dressed up and had a powerful aura. It was as if he was born to live in the eyes of others. A trace of unwillingness appeared in Shi's eyes. She knew. She knew from the moment she entered the hall. She knew from the moment she saw the crown princess attire that her 2 hours of meticulous dressing had been completely meaningless, regardless of appearance, temperament, or dressing. Today, she was suppressed by that woman who was high up in the air. After Lu Furen finished chatting with the Furen, she looked up at her daughter. Taking in her dejected expression, she could not help but feel heartache. With your appearance, there are countless nobles in the capital. Mother will definitely find a top young talent for you." She faintly interrupted her mother's words. "But in this world, there is no talent that can compare to Brother Yunqi." Chapter 941. Madame Lu was speechless. In terms of status, who could be more honorable than the crown prince in this world? But Madame Lu raised her head and glanced at the crown prince consort, who was smiling gracefully as the Empress held her hand. The crown prince consort who was so dazzling among so many madams and misses who were dressed up meticulously. She sighed. With such a crown prince consort who was a newlywed, how could the crown prince's thoughts fall on her daughter? Moreover, as a mother, she always hoped for the best for her daughter. No matter how honorable the title of the crown prince's secondary consort sounded, she was only a concubine. Which mother would be willing to let her pampered daughter grow up to be a lowly concubine? Moreover, if Shi married into another family, if she suffered any grievances, their family could still help her. But if she married into the imperial family, then her life and death would truly be up to fate. She had always believed that she would understand this reasoning and waited for her to figure it out herself. But now she seemed to be even more bewitched. Madame Lu held her daughter's hand. It seemed that she had to have a good talk with her daughter after returning home today. At this time, an eunuch's shrill voice came from outside. "His Highness the Crown Prince has arrived." The hall instantly quieted down, and the womenfolk all sat upright. Some who had never seen the Crown Prince stealthily glanced at the Crown Prince, who had just stepped into the hall. Yunqi did not care about the various obscure sizing up gazes in the store. He personally presented the gift held by the eunuch behind him to the Empress, then gave a big bow and said a few words of blessing. Gu Shengyin's eyes widened the moment Yunqi entered the hall. This man really was. Her heart warmed, as if it was slowly washed by the warmest wine. There were too many womenfolk in the hall, so it was not convenient for Yunqi to stay for long. After personally presenting the gift, he glanced at Gu Shengyin behind the Empress, smiled at her, and prepared to leave. At this time, Ping Shi Wang Estate's old consort, who was sitting on the other side of the Empress, suddenly cried out. Everyone's attention was attracted by her actions. The old consort of Ping Shi Wang was more than 60 years old. Her silver hair was meticulously tied into a bun. Her eyes were not as turbid as the eyes of an ordinary old person. Instead, she was very spirited. She was of high seniority in the royal family and had a good reputation. Even the empress would affectionately address her as Imperial Aunt. The empress asked with great concern, "What's wrong, Imperial Aunt?" Ping Shiwang's old consort narrowed her eyes and smiled. She pointed at Gu Shengyin and then pointed at Yun Qi. This old one took a look just now and found that the clothes on His Highness the Crown Prince and Her Highness the Crown Prince consort seemed to be made from the same material. Everyone took a closer look. Sure enough, the Crown Prince was wearing the same heavy purple robe. When he came in earlier, no one paid much attention to him. Now that he was standing with the Crown Princess, their clothes were not the same. Even the cloud patterns on their cuffs were exactly the same. A few of the newly married madams secretly blushed, but the older madams all laughed out loud. Her Highness the Empress took a closer look and then looked teasingly at Gu Shengyin, who was blushing and forcing herself to remain calm. "Aya, this is incredible. It's fine if you two go in and out together, but now, even your clothes have to be made from the same material?" Such a small matter, if it really happened to Gu Shengyin, she would not feel anything at all. But Su Chaohua had never experienced such a situation, so she could only feign shyness and smile while pinching her handkerchief. Chapter 942. Yun Qi admired his little wife's adorable blush and felt that she would be embarrassed if this continued. Thus, he coughed lightly and stood up. "This prince felt that this material looked good, so I had the manufacturing company use it to make an outer robe." The Crown Prince's words were clearly helping the Crown Prince consort out of her predicament. When everyone saw the Crown Prince consort's slightly red face, how could they not know? They sensibly changed the topic. Seeing this, Yun Qi did not stay any longer and bid farewell to the Empress before leaving the hall. Gu Shengyin only felt that the madams in the hall were looking at her with very thought-provoking gazes. She knew what they were thinking and did not speak. She just sat there demurely like the Crown Prince consort. Seeing her like this, the Empress nodded in satisfaction. The Crown Prince consort of the imperial family could be shy, but she still had to be able to control the situation at crucial moments. Those madams were all shrewd people. When they saw that the Crown Prince consort was so fond of the Crown Prince, their smiles became even more solicitous when they faced Gu Shengyin. Even old consort Ping Shi tugged on Gu Shengyin's hand and said that this child had an affinity with her. Without any explanation, she pinned a rare purple jade cloud hairpin on Gu Shengyin's hair. Lu Shi sat quietly at the side with a very calm expression. But if one looked closely, they would discover that the handkerchief she had placed on her skirt had been scratched out of shape. The fingernails under the handkerchief had even dug into her palms until they were bleeding. Wearing a similar outer robe and taking the initiative to help his wife out, this was his big brother Yun Qi. Madame Lu had originally been very worried when she saw the scene in the hall and was afraid that her daughter would lose control of her emotions. Now that she saw Lu Shi like this, she felt much more reassured and comforted. It looked like she had really grown up and was able to distinguish between important and urgent matters. However, she didn't know what her daughter was thinking in her heart at this moment with a calm expression. Gu Shengyin sat with her for a while before being chased out of the hall by the Empress. The Empress said that she wanted to chat with her old friends and did not want her to eavesdrop. However, Gu Shengyin knew that the Empress was afraid that she would be bored sitting here alone and wanted her to go out and play. She smiled and accepted the Empress' good intentions. She bowed and walked out of the Empress Palace with the palace maids behind her. Seeing Gu Shengyin's figure disappear from the hall, Lu Shi's eyes flickered. She also found an excuse to say goodbye to Lu Shi and walked out. "Your Highness Crown Prince Consort." Gu Shengyin was walking slowly in the imperial garden. She said that she would be leaving for a while, but she couldn't go too far. She couldn't go back to her own palace, so she could only walk around the imperial garden. Fortunately, the imperial garden of the royal family contained countless precious flowers and plants in the world. No matter when one came, they would always be able to appreciate a different kind of beauty. This voice made Gu Shengyin stop in her tracks. She recognized this voice and was even more clear about who the owner of this voice was. She quickened her pace and caught up. This was the first time she looked at Gu Shengyin so carefully. She had a new look in her eyes. She had always known that Su Chaohua was good-looking. As early as when Su Chaohua was still in her boudoir, the emperor had praised her for her beauty and etiquette. In the past, she had always looked at this woman who had stolen her sweetheart with a strange gaze. This time, looking at her as a stranger, she was shocked to realize how beautiful she was. From beginning to end as a woman, she was amazed and jealous. She was amazed at Su Chaohua's unique beauty. She was even more jealous that after her marriage, this kind of beauty had a layer of charm and grace that a young girl did not have. Chapter 943. She had heard of a saying. When a woman got married, it was equivalent to a second growth. Usually, after a woman got married, there would be two different situations. One was that her original beauty would become even more dazzling under the nourishment, and the other was that she would lose her original brilliance under the waste. No matter how one looked at it, Crown Princess Su Chaohua belonged to the former. This also meant that after her wedding, she was living very well in the Eastern Palace. Gu Shengyin stood there with a faint smile on her face, allowing her to size her up. She was originally wondering when she would remember the difference between their statuses. But it was obvious that the other party did not realize this and only kept staring at her. Gu Shengyin finally could not help but speak. "Miss Lu, it seems that the rules this consort had you learn last time, Miss Lu did not learn them well enough." The cold voice without any warmth made she suddenly come back to her senses. She remembered her experience in the past 3 months and her heart quivered. She quickly bowed to Gu Shengyin. "Crown Princess, please forgive me." This subject was amazed by Her Highness' beauty and forgot herself for a moment. "Please forgive me." Gu Shengyin looked at Shi with some surprise. She did not expect that one day, Su Chaohua could hear praise from Shi's mouth. She chuckled and looked at Shi. "Miss Lu, why are you looking for this consort?" Shi remembered the purpose of her visit and looked hesitantly at the palace made behind Gu Shengyin. This meant that she wanted to send her away. Gu Shengyin did not do as she wished. "Miss Lu, if you have something to say, you can say it directly." She was ashamed and angry. How could she let others hear what she was going to say later? But she could not do anything to Gu Shengyin. Gu Shengyin enjoyed Shi's conflicted look for a while with a wicked interest. When she looked at him with pleading eyes again, he finally mercifully let the palace made behind him leave. He only left his trusted aide Kai He by his side. She glanced at Kai He and then looked at Gu Shengyin's expression. Inside, she knew that this was most likely the Crown Princess confidant. The other probably would not leave her without someone by her side. She secretly took a deep breath in her heart, as if giving herself unlimited courage. She looked straight at Gu Shengyin and said, "Crown Princess consort, I wonder if His Highness the Crown Prince has ever mentioned this subject in front of you?" Gu Shengyin was speechless. Was this a showdown? She thought about it for a moment. When encountering such a situation, a normal person's reaction would probably be to be surprised and ask impatiently. She was probably waiting for his response too, right? Thus, Gu Shengyin looked at Shi in confusion and said faintly, "Perhaps, but Ben Gong doesn't remember." Shi, who was filled with the desire to confide but couldn't vent. Why would there be such an unconventional person? She took a deep breath and forced a smile on her face. Today, she came with the courage to cut off all means of retreat. She absolutely could not give up because of this little setback. The next moment, Shi's eyes turned red. She looked pitifully at Gu Shengyin and said, "Crown Princess consort, this subject knows that in your heart, this subject is as insignificant as the dust on the ground. It doesn't matter if you don't remember this subject." Gu Shengyin impatiently interrupted her. "Miss Lu, Ben Gong came out today to admire the flowers, not to listen to your sentimental self-talk." Shi, the bitter atmosphere that he had worked so hard to create was instantly destroyed. Chapter 944. She looked at Gu Shengyin in confusion. In her impression, Su Chaohua was a woman with perfect etiquette. She would never do something as unreasonable as interrupting someone's speech. However, she had already interrupted his statement twice today. Was there a mistake in the rumors? Or was this woman too good at acting? Gu Xingyin did it on purpose. Su Chaohua was gentle and generous, but in front of her love rival, if she still cared about her ladylike demeanor, then she was not generous, she was stupid. She wanted Lu Shi to hold it in. Hold it in. But Gu Xingyin clearly underestimated Lu Shi's tenacity. After being interrupted twice in a row, Lu Shi quickly organized her words and began her third statement. This time, she clearly learned her lesson. She did not use any flirting techniques and went straight to the point. Your Highness the Crown Prince Consort, this subject's daughter came this time to ask you to help me and His Highness the Crown Prince. Lu Shi looked earnestly at Gu Xingyin. Gu Xingyin, oh, was there something wrong with this woman's head? She purposely looked behind her and discovered that the usually calm Kai he was also looking at Lu Shi with a face full of shock. Clearly, she was quite frightened. She was not the only one who was shocked. This realization made her relax. It was clear that the problem was not her, but this Lu Shi who had been tricked for some reason. Probably because the Crown Prince Consort and her servant's expressions were too surprised, Lu Shi very considerately paused as if to give the two time to react. When Gu Xingyin frowned and came back to his senses, Lu Shi once again began her affectionate confession. Your Highness the Crown Prince Consort, His Highness the Crown Prince and I have known each other since we were young. We have more than 10 years of feelings. I know that you are the Crown Prince Consort, but I do not dare to ask for such a noble position like yours. I only hope that you can help me and His Highness on account of my sincerity to him. Gu Xingyin sighed in amazement. Listen, what is the art of language? Clearly, Yunqi had already made it clear to her that from now on, the two of them had nothing to do with each other, but from Lu Shi's mouth, it became the two of them were in love with each other, but because she was in the middle, they could not be together. If at this moment, the person occupying Su Chaohua's body wasn't himself, he would have had the system cheat and knew that his lover would never betray him. Most likely, any woman who heard these words would have doubts in their hearts. After Lu Shi finished speaking, she almost lost all her strength. She anxiously waited for Gu Xingyin's response. She might get angry and fly into a rage. She might question the Crown Prince and make a scene. If that happened, there would definitely be cracks in the relationship between her and the Crown Prince. At that time, he would be able to use their many years of relationship to climb to the top. She might endure it, but once the seed of doubt was planted, it would start to sprout. After a long time, it would lead to a bigger conflict between the two of them. Or the best possibility was, but Lu Shi had thought of so many things, but she didn't expect that Gu Xingyin's expression didn't change at all after hearing her words. She felt the other party's gaze lightly sweep across her face. That gaze carried a trace of coldness, and the other party looked at her with a faint smile. Facing Gu Xingyin's expression, a trace of panic suddenly flashed across Lu Shi's heart. It was as if all the most secretive things buried deep in her heart had been seen through by her, without a trace left out. Chapter 945. She subconsciously puffed out her chest, as if this would give her a little more confidence. Seeing that Gu Xingyin did not speak, she thought that the other party was considering, so she continued, Brother Yunqi originally promised me that he would marry me 3 months after the wedding. After saying this, she was satisfied to see that Kai He, who was behind Gu Xingyin, had turned pale. But before she could rejoice, she heard a gloomy voice behind her. Is that so? Lu Shi was frightened and suddenly turned around. Yunqi was standing behind her. She did not know how long the other party had been standing there and how much he had heard of her words. However, Lu Shi was not in the mood to think about this at this moment. She was so frightened by Yunqi's sudden burst of aura that she could not stand steadily. Lu Shi had never seen such a terrifying expression on Yunqi's face. The other party's dark eyes stared at her and his expression was frighteningly cold. He looked at her as if he was looking at a dead object. It was clearly a suitable season, but Lu Shi felt that she had fallen into an ice cave in an instant. She did not doubt that in that instant, Yunqi wanted to take her life. Lu Shi's body started to tremble uncontrollably. Yunqi's voice was very low. This prince did not know that this prince and Miss Lu had made a lifelong vow of love? Lu Shi opened her mouth and wanted to explain, but she could not say anything. Yunqi stared at her coldly and continued, "This prince thought that this prince had already made things clear to Miss Lu back at the pavilion. This prince does not want to be too rude to women, but that is also based on the other party's tactfulness." Lu Shi was so frightened by his sinister aura that she could not help but take a step back. However, Yunqi did not intend to let her go and stepped forward. His eyes were sinister as he stared at her coldly. "This prince will say this one last time, the crown princess is this prince's life. If anyone dares to have any ideas about her, this prince will definitely make them regret it for the rest of their lives." Lu Shi finally could not bear it and knelt on the ground with a plop. This appearance, Yunqi disdainfully glanced at Lu Shi, who had lost her composure, and coldly shouted, "Scram!" Lu Shi hurriedly got up from the ground as if he had been pardoned and left unsteadily. When Yunqi turned around and looked at Gu Shengyin again, it was as if he had changed into another person. The gloominess on his face disappeared without a trace and was replaced by tenderness in his eyes. Kai He had already tactfully retreated when Yunqi arrived. Yunqi looked at his calm wife and said with a hint of nervousness in his voice, He was a little scared. Had just seen his violent side. What if she was afraid of him? Gu Shengyin turned around as if it was her first time meeting Yunqi. In the past, the other party had always been gentle and harmless in front of her. She had thought that her lover was really a gentle and occasionally lively little lamb. Only today did he realize that the other party was not harmless at all. He was clearly a sleeping lion. Yunqi noticed that his wife's eyes were wandering on his face, and he felt uneasy. Unexpectedly, the person opposite him suddenly laughed out loud. Yunqi was confused by her laughter, but at least he knew that she was not angry, so he was relieved. You're not angry? You're not afraid? He took a step forward and gently hugged his wife before softly asking. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.